Here's a little bit about Walter. He was born and raised in northern Uganda. After high school, he attended Egerton University in Kenya and earned a degree in agricultural engineering. He immigrated to the US in 1986 and settled in San Diego. Once here, he realized that there were no programs available to address the needs of African refugees in San Diego. Therefore, in 1989, he founded the Alliance for African Assistance with the purpose of helping fellow refugees. Because there was a great need, the organization quickly opened various programs for refugees from all over the world. In addition to a US headquarters, the Alliance for African Assistance is now an international organization with offices in Italy, Kenya, and Uganda. Walter has served on various boards, including the Rotary Club of San Diego. He's a member of Club 33, the California Refugee Health Advisory Board, the California State Advisory Committee for Refugees, the California Refugee Forum, the Community Building of United Way. It just goes on. He's involved. He's currently on the board of Quench and Connect, a nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting schools in Uganda. He's also received numerous awards and recognitions, including the United Way's Ben Polk Award of Excellence, Rotarian of the Quarter, and has been highlighted as a prominent refugee by the Office of United Nations Commissioner for Refugees. Walter's going to come up, but I wanted to say that as we discussed last week, we want to help him help the 510 asylum seekers his organization is sponsoring. And so they've asked for financial donations and also in-kind donations. Jara sent out a list. I'm going to extend the deadline to another Friday, and you can, not this Friday, but the following. You can bring items here next week. You can bring them to my house, and you can also bring them to Heather's office. Oh, it's dark next week. We'll forget about bringing it here. Heather's office, or you could drop them at my house if you live closer to Carmel Valley. So we'll send out the list again. But anyway, here's Walter.
Judy, thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. I think I do better like this and walk around. I have been in the refugee resettlement since 1989. And the group that we have always resettled were refugees that come to United States here with assistance and help given by the United States government throughout the time that they're here until they become self-sufficient. My friends, last month, I got a call from the State Department that because of the crisis in Afghanistan, there is a group that they will be bringing to United States, that they will come here and apply for asylum in United States. And when they get here, they will be given welcome money of $1,225. For those of you that are lawyers, you know how long it normally takes to get asylum. So this money is supposed to take care of them until they get asylum. I repeat, $1,225. Can you survive on that? Generally, asylum, the process normally takes, people that I know of, over 5 years in some cases. But they told us, don't worry, we are going to accelerate the process. And they have given us a period of 6 months. So based on the 6 months, and remember also, we are resettling real refugees coming as well. in addition to these asylum seekers, 510. And the question I'm always asked, are these people screened before they are brought here? It's a question that we asked the State Department as well. And the person that responded, Walter, we are not stupid. We screen these people and make sure whoever we are bringing into United States is not part of the terrorist people that we are fighting. So that one is clear to us. So we are preparing now for 510 asylum seekers. Out of these, 11 have already arrived that are here in San Diego. And good enough, they're living with their relatives. And their relatives are also refugees that are struggling. They're asking these asylum seekers to help them with rent. So we are making payment for rent. And some of them, when they arrive in here, they don't have a relative. We have to put them in hotel. 2 weeks ago, I saw a bill of $4,000 hotel bill. And looking at the 510 refugees, we looked at the average number of a family. We came out with 5. And 5, we divided that. The total families that we are going to be resettling here, according to our calculation, will be 102. So in our calculation, we looked at it. We will need at least $2,500 per person. And look at the calculation. We rounded it up to $250,000 that we need to raise. And when I talk with the State Department, how are we going to resettle these people? They told us the Refugees Resettlement Program, you need to remember when you sign up, it's a public and private partnership. And you know what came to my mind? I have Rotary family. I have my church family as well. And good enough, our past president, Jenny Scott, sent letters to every single Rotary club in the district of 5340. Somebody was telling me that's a beautiful shot and all that. So yeah, 5340. That is our district. And the letter was sent out. I also remember our last international conference that we had in Hamburg. For those of you that were there was a lot of emphasis in the Refugees Resettlement Program. And it was push. And I said, wow, they knew this crisis was coming. So that's why I'm talking with you here. As far as the fundraising is concerned, Club 33 members have already raised $27,000. And I talked with my church as well, La Jolla Presbyterian Church. And the pastor told me yesterday that they have already raised $105,000. Huh? So, in my faith walk, we normally say, God does not give us what we cannot handle. And it's clearly translated into what is happening here. So, a family, 2,500. And in addition to that, another most important thing that I've been discussing with Judy for the longest time, and she's looking into that as well. To get asylum, you need a lawyer. And Judy has been working and talking with some of you here. The husband is also involved in this. And it looks like we are going to be having lawyers as well that will be involved in this. And thank you so much for your partnership in all this. That will be helping us for these people to get asylum very fast so that they don't stay on us, banking on us for a long time. That's my prayer and hope. The other thing that we need a lot is naturally with what these people have gone through, they will need counseling. We are blessed. Right now, I talk with the pastor of Salona Beach Presbyterian Church. He told me they're lining up psychologists, psychiatrists, social worker that will be coming to help us with these people. So I just want to thank you so much for your partnership in this. It means a lot to me as Rotary family that would stand up and identify and work with us to resettle these refugees here. Remember, these people risk their life on our behalf. I get emotional about this. They could have just stayed aside and done nothing and be comfortable. But because they risked their life, that's why they're coming in here. It's our turn now to support them. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to speak.
Thank you so much. Yes, Steve. Yeah. Right. We're going to set something up where we're going to give everybody an opportunity to give. We have to do something particular on our link online, and Elizabeth being gone, we're going to kick this into gear. We've got some foundation funds that we talked about at our board meeting. And so we're going to get busy doing this. You guys also should have received a list of in-kind things that they're looking for that we could donate. And so that's the thing that Judy's also talking about collecting. Yeah, Ray?
You know, the beautiful thing that we have with this community, unlike other refugees, they have at least one person that has been working with us in the United States, in Afghanistan, and they speak English very well. So language is not much of a problem.
Okay, one more question and then we've got to move on to our speaker. Yes, Don? Okay, yeah, you can do that right away. You can do that right away today through the foundation. And we're going to talk about, the board is going to talk to the foundation board about potentially matching whatever the club raises or whatever. Elizabeth and I had a brief conversation about that. But that is forthcoming. But the list that everybody's gotten in the in-kind things that they need every day in their households just to, you know, get up and go in the mornings, that's important. The list. It was emailed. Jira emailed. It'll come out. It'll go out again. Right. It'll go out right away. Okay, great. All right. Well, we're going to have Tom come up and introduce our speaker.
Everything works out the way it's supposed to, because I'm glad I get to sit with the speaker As I told her, I've got an 18-minute introduction prepared, and she'll have 2 minutes to speak. Our guest speaker, Sandra Cardet, was born in Cuba and moved here as a child. And I thought it'd be interesting to talk a little bit about the history of Cuba. I know probably a lot of us have been to the Caribbean, and I've sailed from the Virgin Islands all the way to Grenada and back. And you've got British islands, Dutch islands, and French islands. And if you land in Puerto Rico, it's Spanish. When Columbus set foot on Cuba, he said, "This is the loveliest land ever seen by human eyes." That's what Columbus said. Once the New World was discovered, there was a rush to dominate and own these Caribbean islands because the cash crop was sugar. And the weather was ideal, land was good for farming, soil was great, and there was a very cheap labor source, which was slaves from Africa. And untold wealth was generated by the sugar industry, and the demand was huge in Europe. And what happened was that these islands, the population would be 2% ruling class and up to 98% working class. And over time, there were revolts, and most of the countries earned their independence. The last to do so were the Spanish, which was Puerto Rico and Cuba. In 1895, a revolt became successful. It's kind of stalled for 3 years, and then the Maine blew up in Havana's harbor. And you've all heard, "Remember the Maine." The slogan was, "Remember the Maine to hell with Spain." What it was it was an accident. It wasn't sabotage. But I love this. But the fake press, William Randolph Hearst, sold it to the American public as an act of war. And we got involved with that war. It became the Spanish-American War. 10 months later, the Spanish were defeated. And there was a mass influx of capital from Americans in businesses, sugar, tobacco, everything. And we supported various regimes over time. And in 1953, Fidel Castro organized an attack on a garrison in Santiago. And it was soundly defeated, and he got sentenced to 10 years in prison. He only served 1 year. Through political pressure of the population, they let him out. He was exiled to Mexico. About 3 years later, he had met up with Che Guevara. I love this. 82 rebels on a boat called Grandma, which would be like a day cruiser in the bay, which you see tourists on. They sailed east in bad weather to Cuba, and that was the start of the revolution. And 2.5 years later, we've all seen The Godfather. The 30th of December, basically the government was overthrown. And it was the psychology that they used. And Che Guevara had 300 rebels against a 5,000 garrison troop in Santiago, and the 5,000 put their arms down and surrendered. So that's what happened. And Batista fled with hundreds of millions of dollars, and then Castro took over, and that's where I'll leave this off, but it's fascinating history. And with that, I'd love to introduce, and I'm happy to have, on behalf of Rancho Santa Fe Rotary, Sandra Cardet.
Thank you very much for inviting me. I know this pops, so I hope not to, is it popping now? Okay, okay. Okay, can you hear me like this? Okay, so I'd like to start with just a few slides. Jara, you're gonna pull up some slides. I want to show just a little bit quickly on these slides because it's really hard to do this talk in 25 minutes. There's so much to cover and I can't cover it. So I just wanted you to see, I click here, Jara, click here. Click. Oh, the right one? Okay, there. This is Viñales. It's one of the most beautiful. I took this picture from the bridge overlooking this gorgeous valley. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It's absolutely breathtaking when you see it in different angles. It's fantastic. But I wanted to share with you the natural beauty of Cuba. This is something that they can't ruin. Okay, it's not working, Jara. The right button is not working. Okay. Most of these beautiful buildings were built during the colonial period, and they were not painted in garish colors. They were very subdued, very elegant colors. Is that better? Okay, thank you. And not these garish pinks and purples and colors that you see now on the posters and the travel ads. You'll recognize the Woolworth store in Havana. And these are Cubans doing their shopping prior to the revolution. These are Cuban socialites. Actually, I have a similar picture with my parents. It was a vibrant nightlife, a great economy. The Cuban peso had parity with the US dollar, so it was $1, 1 peso when the economy actually functioned. Did you know that we had a Chinatown in Cuba? And that right there is the entrance to Chinatown, and then in the lower right, is the Chinese cemetery. So believe it or not, there was Chinese Cuban food, and it was good. It's very good when it's combined. Of course, there was a lot of promotion for travel to Cuba, and it was the jet set capital of the world at the time during the 30s, 40s, and early 50s. People wanted to go to Cuba. It was just beautiful. When I got off the airplane in 2005, there were no ads. There were no signs except for this. There's no advertising because there's no free enterprise. But this says, unidos luchamos, unidos vencemos, which means together we struggle, together we will win. So all of these signs that you see are communist propaganda promoting the revolution and promoting themselves. Here it is, socialism is the science of example. That's what they're saying on this one. Great example, huh? These are just a couple of pictures that I personally took of houses that are falling down. There are thousands of these beautiful houses that are just crumbling around people's heads. This one here on the right, this one right here, you can actually see people living in there, even though the roof is caving in. And this is common in Havana. Look at this one. It's pathetic. And I'm an old contractor. I was salivating. I would give anything to be able to restore a beautiful house like this. Here is a typical scene in the interior of Cuba today. There are no cars. There's people living in shabby houses that are falling down. But I wanted you to see, these are cases that were actually won. These are American companies that were nationalized and seized by the communist regime in 1959, 1960, 61, okay? After Castro actually established communism in Cuba. So as you can see, what do we have here? North American Sugar Industries, we have American Sugar Company, IT&T, Exxon was there, Starwood Hotels, Texaco, Coca-Cola, Colgate-Palmolive, big. Well, they went to court and they won. Today's money, they would be worth $8 billion. And that's why the embargo was established on Cuba. That was the reason that the United States actually put the embargo. Oh, there's the popping. That's why they put the embargo on Cuba. It was because Cuba seized American assets, industries, and companies, and it would be worth well over $8 billion today. So those are all the slides I'm going to show you, because now I want to really get to the nitty gritty and actually talk to you about this. If you ask any Cuban, what's wrong with Cuba? You know what they're going to tell you? They're going to say everything. Everything is wrong with Cuba. Cuba is a humanitarian disaster. Preparing for this talk was very difficult for me. I'm a passionate Cuban American who loves this country and who grieves over what happened to my homeland. There's so much wrong with Cuba that I cannot do justice to this subject in 25 minutes. But I'll do my best to tell you about things that most people don't know about. And I think that you'll gain a very different perspective about this once lovely country. My parents were very aware of the problems in Cuba during the 1950s. And as Tom mentioned, on July 26, 1953, Fidel Castro, with these other gentlemen, students and friends from the University of Havana, attacked the Moncada barracks. The attack failed, he was jailed, okay? My parents decided right about this time that maybe it was time to leave. Things were not looking very good. First Batista and his dictatorship, and then Castro and this fomenting of revolution. So by 1955, my parents were living in New Jersey, and they sent for us about 6 months later, after they had purchased all new furniture and gotten a home and gotten settled, gotten jobs. My father went to work for General Motors, my mom for RCA Victor. So they had every intention of returning to Cuba, to our wonderful lives, once things settled down in Cuba. Unfortunately, things never did settle down in Cuba. And now, 65 years later, things are worse than ever before for the Cuban people. It's important to know that the importance of Cuba in the history of the Western Hemisphere is really, it's really out of proportion to its size. The Cuban Missile Crisis of October 1962 had the whole world on high alert. Some of us actually remember that. I remember. Everyone held their breath while President Kennedy and Soviet Secretary Nikita Khrushchev played a game of brinksmanship to see who would blink first. Fearing a nuclear war with Russia, the US agreed that if Russia removed its missiles from Cuba, they would in turn remove our Jupiter ballistic missiles from Italy and from Turkey. And most people don't even know that. So the Russians had to be coerced, and it was a quid pro quo, okay? This was the closest that the superpowers have ever come to mutual annihilation. Fidel Castro had already installed the communist system based on the utopian promises of a small group of socialists in socialists in Cuba that was formed in the early 20s. During this period, socialism was also gaining ground in the United States. And there was a communist party here in the United States. It was called the Communist Party of the United States, called the CPUSA. It was small. These organizations were small, but they did have their supporters in Cuba and in the US. Okay? And I understand it. It's understandable because Marxism sounds really great on paper. It's too bad it just doesn't work in real life. Since 1965, there has been only one party in Cuba, the Communist Party, and it has held complete control since then. Everyone had high hopes that the promises of reform, of free medical care for all, free education, and freedom from tyranny would become a reality under Castro's leadership. Imagine the disappointment when people began to realize that he was a communist who intended on installing a Soviet-style dictatorship on our beautiful island. For over 50 years, every block in Cuba has two very special people living on it. One is a doctor, and the other one is the CDR president. Now, the CDR stands for the Comité de Defensa de la Revolución, the Committee for the Defense of the Revolution. And every block has a president that represents that committee. These people are they're given an important title, president, so that people will respect them and they gives them authority. And they are assigned the duty of reporting illegal activity to the police or the military. Now, illegal activity, and let's put that in quotes, illegal activity is not what you think of as being illegal. It has to do with ordinary household items being brought in and out of people's homes. I know this is weird, so follow me here. Because everything belongs to the state, and one can only purchase items from the state. If you sell your used shoes to someone else, you have committed a crime. That's illegal. If you sell eggs that your chickens laid, that's illegal, okay? If you sell meat from a pig that you raised and you slaughtered, you go to jail. That's illegal. And if you slaughter a cow for beef, for meat, you get 10 years in prison, more than you would if you had murdered an individual. You're in big trouble if you slaughter a cow, really big trouble. The system, this particular system that I'm referring to, has split families apart. Because you really don't know if one of your friends or even one of your family members will turn you into the committee president. Okay? You don't know. In order score points with the president of the committee, of the block committee. They'll turn you in. And the most loyal snitches are rewarded. You might wonder, what's in it for the snitches? Well, since everyone in Cuba must engage in illegal activities to survive, the dossiers that are kept on the snitches become valuable trade for the presidents of the CDR. A snitch can score points by turning in his neighbor in exchange for the president turning a blind eye for the snitch's own illegal activities. In order for communism to succeed, they must have social controls that forces people to become so preoccupied with finding food for their next meal that they cannot think about starting a revolution or creating great art or music or literature. You are being watched and surveilled at all times. There is a real sense of fear among the people. These techniques are tried and true, having been used by the KGB and other dictatorships to control their populations. You cannot live in Cuba without doing illegal things. Illegal activity, of course, includes criticism of the government. If you disagree with anything that the government does, you may not say a word about it to anybody, even if it's true. Because everyone must steal or deal in contraband in order to survive and feed their families, stealing is now called resolver, which means resolve. So if you are trying to get some eggs, you got to go and resolve that problem. So they don't even call it stealing. They've changed the term. Stealing has become a way of life because everybody must do it. Everyone who works, whether it's in a bakery or in a tobacco facility, must steal from the facility in order to sell or barter for food from someone who works at another facility that produces whatever it is that they need. So the tobacco worker will steal a box of cigars in order to sell them to a tourist so that he can purchase coffee. Or the baker will steal flour in order to make a cake to sell to a neighbor for their child's birthday party. Contraband is not guns, ammunition, or drugs as it is in other countries. It's meat, vegetables, fish, eggs, cheese, coffee. Bribes are paid with food, not money, because nobody has any money. This system has produced a corruption that is so complicated and it's very difficult to explain it here. But the police will look the other way in exchange for cheese, a chicken, or some pork meat. The president of the CDR can be bought for some lipstick, perfume, or a pair of Chinese-made shoes. Everyone must steal and commit illegal acts in order to survive. Of course, since everyone is a slave of the state and is paid about $12 a month, it's not really stealing, is it? If the state owns you and your children and has made you work for a pittance for the benefit of the state, it's not really stealing, is it? This is how Cubans have learned to justify and normalize stealing. This is how the social fabric of Cuba and the Cuban people has been dismantled. What is wrong was now right. What was wrong is now right. And what was up is now down. So Cubans like to tell jokes about how things are upside down in Cuba. A doctor earns the equivalent of $20 per month, but a waitress or a taxi driver earns tips. So they take home much, much more. The Cuban with an old car that people love to gawk at is considered wealthy compared to one with only a horse. In the United States, the person with an old car is poor, but the person with the horse is probably well off. And if they have more than one horse, they're rich. If you visit Cuba, you'll see many European men, actually men from all over the world. Can you guess why they go to Cuba? They go for the women. Well, Cuba is the only country in the world where a prostitute, they changed the name of those two, they're called jineteras now, which means horsewoman or rider. They're no longer called whores or prostitutes, okay? That prostitute can be an engineer, a physician, a scientist, a researcher, or a university professor. Upside down. You see, it's upside down. For as little as a new pair of shoes, a lipstick, a blouse, a man can have the pleasure of a beautiful Cuban girl in all her glory, and she's smart and educated too. During the 1960s, government forces destroyed all business and enterprises. I'd like to share a very personal story with you. We have dear family friends who owned a very large bakery that had a wholesale and a retail division. Their trucks delivered baked goods to local hotels and restaurants. The sons of the owners were university educated back when the Cuban education system was among the best in the world. One of the sons was on his way to Europe to spend 6 months traveling and broadening his horizons. During the night, a group of soldiers broke into the bakery and smashed every bit of equipment that the bakery had. Copper cauldrons imported from France were destroyed. Ovens, industrial mixers, and refrigerated display cases made in the United States were destroyed. Tools of capitalism and imperialism would not be allowed. The government rebuilt the bakery and brought in old equipment. They placed the father, who was the real owner, and his sons to work in their own bakery as employees of the state for a pittance. My friend's dreams were shattered forever. He spent the rest of his life living in poverty. Corporations were nationalized. In fact, entire industries were seized, and everyone with a small business, whether it was a dry cleaning business, a florist, or even an ice cream vendor with a cart, had their businesses torn apart and destroyed. Capitalism would not be tolerated. Individual enterprise was now considered a betrayal to the revolution. Like my family, the Cubans who left their homeland in the 1950s and early 60s fully expected to return after the defeat of Castro and the reinstatement of the Constitution and the rule of law. They assumed that the United States would not stand for a Soviet-style regime, communist regime, so close to their shores. After all, they were already in Vietnam fighting the Soviet and China-backed North Vietnamese. So of course, everybody thought the US would defend Cuba only 90 miles offshore. And Cuba with so many American industries and assets and investments. To the disbelief of the Cuban people, the US did nothing and instead pivoted in a big way to Southeast Asia, 9,000 miles away. It was during this time that the infamous Bay of Pigs invasion was planned and launched. We don't have time to discuss the Bay of Pigs invasion. It's a fascinating subject and you can read about it on your own. I'm often asked, just to talk about something else, I'm often asked about Santeria. Does anybody know about what Santeria is? No? Well, it's a religion. It was a belief system that African Cuban people and the less educated classes developed in Cuba. They brought some things from Africa and they mixed it with Christianity and they invented a new religion called Santeria. It's grown into a very popular religion, due in no small part to the abandonment of traditional Christian religions and the closure of all the churches by the communist regime. Religion was outlawed and churches were closed during the 1960s. Forcing thousands of priests and nuns to pack up their belongings and move to Miami and other cities. The sweep was so broad that Castro even closed down the Jesuit high school that he and his brother attended. It was one of over 400 Catholic schools closed throughout the nation, and then Christmas disappeared. Curiously, the abolishment of Christmas, the celebrations that were traditionally associated with Christmas were transferred to New Year's Eve because there was no more religious celebration. Today, New Year's Eve is the most important holiday of the year where families gather and share a meal no matter what. This is the only holiday that the people consider to be sacred, even though it has nothing to do with religion. I'd like to address some myths about that I hear all the time. First, there's the myth of free education. Children who live in the cities are removed from the home at the age of 12 to begin their scholarships. There's a new way of using that word, scholarships, in support of the revolution. The children in rural areas work in the fields 4 hours a day, every day during this time. The government understands that the influence of the parents on their children can be a dangerous thing. And so they begin the indoctrination and the brainwashing of the children at the age of 3 in school. For instance, I went to kindergarten at age 3. The children are taught to repeat slogans about the triumph of the revolution, the victory over imperialism, especially those damn Yankees, and that they only have one father, and that father's name is Fidel. Then there's the myth about the embargo being the cause of Cuba's poverty and misery. Well, the Cuban government has been successfully using this excuse since the 1960s. In fact, the embargo placed on Cuba was in response to Cuba's nationalization of American companies after the revolution. These companies would be valued, as I said, at over $8 billion today. In Cuba, one hears the words blockade used interchangeably with the embargo, but they are not the same. What Cubans refer to as a blockade is, in fact, Cuba's blockade against its own people. Exports and imports in the billions of dollars assure plenty of food and luxury items for the communist leaders and military elite, but very little for the Cuban people. Its largest trading partners include Venezuela, the European Union, China, and Brazil. There is no blockade. Many countries trade with Cuba, and the Cuban government can purchase anything they need from many countries. Let's talk about free medical care. If you have a heart attack or an accident in Cuba, anywhere outside of Havana, you will likely die because no ambulance will come for you. There are no ambulances. If you do make it to a hospital, you'll have to have someone provide the necessary disinfecting and medical care, medical supplies for your surgery. The surgery room is bare. People going in for scheduled surgeries must purchase surgery kits containing some, but not all of the items that a surgeon might need to care for you, including scalpels, needles, suturing thread, reusable syringes, etc. The hospital beds have no sheets or pillowcases. You have to take your own. There is no soap or disinfectant, and the whole hospital reeks of stale urine and everything else. The doctor will cry when you offer him a $20 bill for his services. And I know this personally because this is what I experienced when my mother fell down in the hotel and broke her hip when we were there. I simply could not believe that this was actually taking place. Yes, medical care is free, but what kind of medical care is possible without medication, a scan, or an X-ray? Even basic care is not possible for Cubans in Cuba. The Cuban propaganda machine sends out countless press releases and false information about the amazing healthcare system in Cuba. It's a joke, don't believe it. Doctors, even those amazing musicians who were made famous over the years, like the Buena Vista Social Club, they work for an agency of the government that collects all of the money from record sales and concerts, and then pays out the musicians about $20 a month. Doctors' wages are paid directly to the regime to distribute as they see fit, and so doctors get about $30 a month. When I discuss these things in Cuba, you know what they would say to me? Well, you pay taxes in the US, it's the same thing. That's what they're told, that this is taxation. It's not taxation. It's exploitation. It's slavery. I'd like to close with some information about the aftermath of the recent uprisings in Cuba a couple of months ago. This was a momentous time, and we thought something great would happen, but no, the military put an end to it by jailing many of the protesters and passing the new Decree number 25. Decree number 25 makes it a criminal offense for anyone to use social media to criticize the government or otherwise reduce the prestige of Cuba in the world. There is zero tolerance for dissent. That's why you haven't heard any more about it. It's suppressed. just as there always was. The reasons Cubans are so passionate about politics is because everything for them is about politics. Unfortunately, much of the world has been deceived by false information and propaganda about Cuba's scientific breakthroughs and advancements. This is the reason I spend so much time explaining the true state of the Cuban people. As one tiny illustration, consider immigration to Cuba. Prior to the revolution, people from all over the world immigrated to Cuba with its promise of sunny weather, great food, happy people. Now, there is no immigration to Cuba. Instead, thousands risk their lives to get out to freedom in a box, in the cargo hold of an airplane, or by sea through shark-infested waters. All of us have hopes, hopes of a better future for our children and ourselves, hopes of being able to travel and experience new things and exciting things. Cubans have no hope for a better future. There is simply no way to get ahead, and there is no upward mobility. It is unknown. A people denied of aspirations are a people without a future. The revolution that cost so many lives was a dismal failure. Castro promised everything and delivered nothing. Thank you very much.